Welcome to Partner Up with Amy Carroll. As a communication coach, trainer, speaker, and author, I'm delighted to be your host, and I'm excited to bring you insights and ideas to help you solve your communication conundrums. This is my 45th episode of my show, Partner Up with Amy Carroll. If you want to find out more about me, what the show's about, feel free to listen to previous episodes on my website, carrollcoaching.com, or go directly to the VoiceAmerica.com business channel. And you can always find it on using whatever your favorite podcast app is. Now, if you missed last week's show, I had a chat with my social media gal T in an episode we called Triggers, Tips, and Travel. We offered you tips and tricks for packing your partner attitude when traveling this summer and beyond. Be sure to check that out. That's episode played on July 2nd. Today, my guest is Rajkumari Neogy. Welcome, Rajkumari.
Hello, thank you for having me, Amy.
You know, you and I got connected through Sarah Payton.
We did.
An amazing human being who I got to interview for this show. We both know her well, and Sarah was generous enough to also give me her time. So listeners, if you want to check out that interview, that was from March 12th. Though I want to take a few minutes to go through Rajkumari's bio because it's going to set the tone for what we're going to be talking about. Now, Rajkumari is based in San Francisco. She's an epigenetic coach, and don't worry if you don't know what that is, she's going to tell us. She's also an executive consultant focused on the intersection of neurobiology, culture, and empathy in today's business world. Possessing a rare blend of scientific prowess and emotion, Neogy, I'm still working on getting that pronunciation correct, believes
Neogy.
that, oh, now I've got a whole nother version. Okay, we're going to do it again. Neogy. All right, good. You promise you'll correct me again if I get it wrong?
Very kind of you.
Okay, good. So Neogy believes that passionate self-reflection coupled with dedicated curiosity defines true leadership. I want to say that again because that's powerful. Passionate self-reflection. So maybe you'll tell us, Rajkumari, about how you help leaders to move to a place of passionate self-reflection. Coupling it with dedicated curiosity is what she uses to define true leadership. Now, specializing in the technology sector, Neogy has worked with high-powered worldwide organizations for more than 2 decades, training leaders at Google, Facebook, Adobe, Indeed, Slack, Salesforce, and others. The approach she uses to effective management combines the desire, or rather discovery, of deep-rooted transgenerational trauma with best practices for dismantling toxic work cultures. That's another thing that we're going to put this on the list of things you're going to define for us is that transgenerational trauma. Because I think some listeners might be familiar with it, starting to become common to talk about it, though I think it's still quite new for a lot of people. Weaving humor and vulnerability into psychology to tell powerful stories about the human need to belong. Neogy helps individual leaders and organizations identify critical interpersonal issues in the workplace, increasing the effectiveness, the emotional intelligence, and sustained performance among teams. In 2013, Neogy founded iRestart. It's a company that provides resources for leadership development and organizational epigenetics to address issues of team dysfunction and exclusion. And I know that we're going to get into more about that, what exclusion means, how significant it is, and how to fight against it. Through iRestart, Neogy created the Biology of Belonging Bootcamp framework. And I, for one, my friends, I'm going to be attending the next one whenever it is. And it employs 6 powerful methodologies to swiftly facilitate sustainable permanent change within organizations. And I'm going to tell you more about how to get in touch with Rajkumari later in the show, because you're going to want to sign up for her newsletter because that's going to give you access to this Biology of Belonging Bootcamp framework. So there we have it. Now, Neogy previously held positions in training development in several tech companies, including Adobe and Facebook. She frequently presents on epigenetics and the biology of belonging at worldwide conferences like Culturati, Responsive Conference and Culture Summit. She holds a bachelor's degree in film from San Jose State University, a master's degree in transformative, right? Did I say right? Transformative leadership development from the California Institute of Integral Studies, and also the author of The Wit Factor, Shifting the Workplace Paradigm by Becoming Your Optimal Self. Oh my God, that was a lot of work for a mouth with braces.
You did it beautifully.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy now that we're going to turn it over to put the focus on you. You know, Rajkumari, when I was reading one of your articles in Fast Company, I came across a quote, which I found, as the Brits would say, is spot on.
Mm.
And you may refer to this later, though I want to put it up front for our listeners. So listen up, folks. She says, every single time you are mean to an employee, interrupt them, or dismiss them in some way, you are shutting down the part of their brain that is making you money. Now, if that's not going to get people to sit up and listen, I don't know what is.
Well, that came directly from a CEO who I hadn't yet met. So we had actually slotted about an hour before our full day of executive training. And right after the niceties, 10 seconds after the niceties were completed, that particular CEO asked me, what's the point of me being nice to my employees? And after I kind of, regrounded myself
Right.
and took a breath, that is actually what I said to the CEO. Because they had just gotten 97 million in funding. And to your point, that absolutely did make the CEO sit up and listen.
Yeah.
Because after about, I would say 5 seconds, literally the CEO looked to the ground, pondered something, and then looked back up at me and said, so what do I do?
Oh, wow. That's a fast learner.
And so, just to tease that story a little bit, tease it out a little bit, that's a really heartbreaking moment, right? To go from what's the point of me being nice to people to how do I be nice to people? That's a very quick journey to your point, but to even have to ask that question. And Tony Hsieh, who was the former CEO of Zappos,
Okay.
there's a beautiful quote on the Zappos campus wall that I had the honor of walking through when I did the keynote for Responsive Conference. And the quote says this, and I just love this quote so much. What's the ROI in hugging your mom? Right? Like, I mean, just because it may not have ROI, there is so much value in getting hugged by mom to those who have moms who are willing to hug them. Let's also be clear about that. Yeah. And to really understand like what's underneath the hood of being engaged with a workforce, having that sense of safety, respect, collaboration, communication, that all kind of funnels into high performance and funnels into incredible productivity and revenue. And something that I say all the time is, look, you can motivate teams through fear,
Yep.
and you can motivate teams through curiosity. Either way, you're going to make a ton of money. Like you'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
But the question is, what are the values and principles that you're bringing forward within your organization, within your team? And what's the impact that you want to make kind of on the global village, at humanity at large, right? So it really is how you want to show up and how you want to engage with individuals in order to create a system that addresses and holds the well-being of individuals or not.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. And, I think when I say we, I'm talking about the global business world. I think we're making baby steps, moving in that direction of that there's a responsibility we have that's far more than the bottom line. The contribution, as you called it, the global village.
Yeah, I think those baby steps are absolutely present. I can feel them, they're palpable. One of the things that you mentioned, Sarah Payton, one of the things I love about Sarah Payton is the fact that she's a neuroscience educator, and we do a lot of collaborative projects together. So, as her expertise is the neuroscience educator, I'm the corporate translator. And so I take that information and I kind of put it into PowerPoint presentations
Mm,
that allow teams to really understand, well, what is the value of me being nice to my employees?
hmm
And then how do we get there?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to shift to maybe a more superficial question, though I have to say I was so curious after I found out that you got this BA, this degree in film. I have to know, what impact or contribution has it had, if at all, which I'm sure it has, on the work that you do today?
Wow. I don't think I've ever answered this question publicly, so here we
Oh,
go.
goody.
I never wanted a degree in film. My dad, however, had other plans. And it
Uh-huh.
was hilarious. I'm going to just share this story because it's so ironic, in my opinion. I was a junior in high school and we had like career day or something. And I was like, and so we spent the whole day in the library doing research. I don't remember what it was, but I came out of that day so excited and clear that I really wanted to be a cardiologist. Like that for me was like, that's it. I want to be a cardiologist. I've always wanted to be a cardiologist. I did some research that day and I nailed it. And I remember walking home so smug. I was like, this is going to be so easy. I have an Indian father, the whole thing about either you can be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. I've got this in the bag. So I go home and I'm like, hey, Papa, I've decided I want to be a cardiologist. And he looks at me, he's like, no, you're not. And like all the error messages that go up in the cartoon moments went up. And I was like, wait, what do you mean? And he's like, you're going to get a degree in film. And I was like, wait, what? I don't want a degree in film. And the hilarity of hilarity is like, the Indian, kid that comes home and says, I want to be an artist or a musician, right? And the
Right.
parents are like, no, you're going to be a doctor, lawyer, or an engineer. That happened in reverse.
That's insane.
It was so, the fight that ensued
Oh, yeah.
for weeks was unbelievable. And so So anyway, here we are, have a degree in film, as you can see. And I resented almost every moment of it, to be quite full. No, I really did.
Well,
And I
yeah, I
actually
shouldn't laugh because
back,
you're right, because it represents that, that the adult forcing something on a child that's not what they're meant to do.
but again, the irony of ironies is that when I applied for my very first Silicon Valley job,
Hmm.
and I was told this later, out of 100 applicants, all with CS degrees, right, computer
Oh,
science,
no.
I was the only one that was chosen because of my film degree. And the
Unbelievable.
reason why was because at that time, the technology that they were working on was MPEG-2 compression.
Uh-huh.
So I had such an eye for films, an eye for seeing detail, because
Right.
that's what I spent the last how many years freaking doing. They're like, yeah, we don't want anybody. We want you to come see our pixelated issues with our video. And I was like, okay. And that started my journey in the tech world. And I just fell in love with companies, corporations, technology, and then, of course, very quickly understanding team dynamics and, more importantly, team dysfunction.
Yeah. I brought my own with me. Wow, that's isn't that ironic? Talk about a gift horse. I think that's the right analogy.
Beautifully said.
Jeez.
Yeah. Wow, I've never shared that story.
So, Okay, here's where I need you to educate me a bit. We talked about epigenetics. Perhaps define that for myself and the listeners, what it is. How does it relate to workplace dynamics? Maybe throw in some examples.
So let's take a step back again and talk a little bit about my childhood.
Okay.
Because it's related.
Me too. I get it. Totally.
So, so I would definitely say I had an incredibly challenging childhood. And when I left and became an adult and went off into the world and spent some years in the corporate world, I was a little flummoxed about why relationship dynamics with me and others were very challenging. And, for a long time, as is with many folks, there's kind of like, oh, it's their issue. And things became really challenging for me. And I decided to actually get some support and really look at why this was so incredibly challenging. And it turned out that that was the beginning of my own journey of self reflection and really unraveling my own, let's just use the word trauma because that's what it is.
Sure.
And really, I love Gabor Mate, who's the author of many, many books, especially Scattered, who defines trauma as the loss of one's self, right? The loss of connection to oneself.
Mm-hmm. Is he
And we
the
do that. Sorry, go ahead.
is he the one that wrote When the Body Says No?
That's Bessel van de Kolk. And when the body, oh wait, when the body says no, yes, yes, that is him. Oh my gosh, yes. Body keeps score is Bessel van de Kolk. Body says no is Gabor.
Yes.
That's awesome.
What an amazing book. It speaks so directly to the work that I do, focusing on the predator prey partner and how predator and prey will have physical illnesses that are directly related to personality style, and partner doesn't seem to have any related illnesses.
100%. So that's for a different episode. We can
Yes,
definitely cover
okay.
that next time. Because I've definitely, had an opportunity to witness that with myself and to what you're saying.
Mm.
And as I started kind of going on this journey of self-reflection, and I found myself at NLP Marin, I spent about 5 years. I did their 3-year intensive class, and then I did additional, more advanced master level courses in the quantum physics understanding and how that relates to behaviors.
Hmm.
I kind of then took all of that information, and as I went off and built iRestart and started doing a lot of research around the neuroscience, the neurobiology, I stumbled across something called epigenetics, and I was so flummoxed again because I was like, wait, what is this? And it was actually Rachel Yehuda's work in 2016, where she talks about how the children of Holocaust survivors exhibit similar or near similar symptoms of PTSD as those who actually did survive the concentration camp.
Amazing.
And when I read that, I think my mouth dropped and stayed there for about an hour. And I think I had to actually get up and go for a walk and process that. Because then I started thinking, of course, immediately of my own family and the transgenerational patterning that showed up in all of with me, with my dad, with my grandfather, with my great grandfather. And I tell this story with such pride and heartbreak at the same
Mm.
time because it one kind of, holds evidence to this epigenetic concept, but it also really kind of brings that heartache into play because it's like, wait, these patterns, they're so outdated. Why do we continue to do this? Why are our behaviors unbeknownst to us, right?
Right.
Continuing to show up. And so that that comment that you made when you read passionate self-reflection, it's to really look at what are those transgenerational patterns that we hold in our cellular biology
Yeah.
that we don't even know,
Yep.
that's causing us to yell at someone at work or avoid someone else at work or have conflict with someone or et cetera, et cetera. I mean, a great example of this is I was coaching an executive team in LA many moons ago. And one of the biggest complaints before I started that was shared with me and that I found out during my discovery tour of talking to each of the executives was that the CEO and the head of sales really had a challenging relationship. And in fact, the head of sales was deemed as a bully. One of the people on the team called him someone I feared the most. And it was just this ongoing battle with him and others, and especially the CEO.
Okay.
And so when I sat down to do this epigenetic coaching, the very first thing I do is I kind of draw literally a map on, a mechanical pencil and a piece of paper. And I draw this map. And this map is about looking at where transgenerationally there was an experience of being excluded and a disconnection in belonging. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment, but I want to finish this story. And so I'm drawing out this map and I'm asking questions to everyone about their parents and their grandparents, et cetera. Just a 45-minute session. Turns out the CEO is in fact a survivor of the Holocaust. And the head of sales actually had a grandfather in the Third Reich.
Wow.
And so it might seem unrelated or disconnected, but it made perfect sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
That why they weren't getting along, why he had this bullying nature, why she had to hold her ground, right? Whatever it might have been. And so we started to work with that in the coaching. And within about, I would say, 4 or 5 weeks, my cell phone started blowing up with texts from the rest of the team saying, "What the heck are you doing to him? He's starting to be collaborative. He's actually communicating. I'm starting to feel safe with him. What are you doing?" So what that says is regardless of the patternings that we bring with us to a conversation or the same pattern but the same conversation over decades, there is absolutely an opportunity to shift that in our brains and in our biology. And that's the work that I do.
Mm. As I was listening to your story, what was coming up for me was I've had for a long time, I've had anger that I've always had since childhood. And for many years in my reflection, I'm like, I don't understand where on earth this anger comes from. I had a great childhood, mildly dysfunctional, nothing unusual, gave great family stories. And I kept thinking, did I suppress something? And I really felt like that was not the case, except there was just this anger unrelated. And now as I listen to you, I think, yeah. And when I look back at the trauma and the dysfunction on my mother's side and on my father's side, and the Irish um, roots of the famine and the alcoholism, and it all makes sense.
Yep, absolutely. And that ties directly to our sense of belonging. And we
Uh,
take that sense of belonging, diminished, incapacitated, whatever it is, and we show up in the workplace and we wonder why things are the way they are.
yeah. And the other thing that makes so much sense is I've always heard we replicate our family dynamics in the work environment. And this is making sense as to why it is what it is.
It is. And we can think of the workplace as our secondary family because not that they actually are, but it is where we spend so much time, and more importantly, where we're constantly in relationship with each other. So
Mm-hmm.
all the attachment issues, all of the ways in which we survived or delighted or were warmly welcomed in our families, we bring all of that information, all of that behavior into trying to relate with others and wonder why sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to go for a break in a minute. And I would like for listeners, if you want to connect with Rajkumari, go directly to her website. I'm going to spell it for you. It's Rajkumari Neogy, and that's RajKumariNeogy.com. And when you're there, definitely sign up for her newsletter to get access to the Biology of Belonging Bootcamp. When we come back, we're going to be hearing more from Rajkumari and taking an even deeper dive into this fascinating topic. Stay tuned. You're listening to Partner Up with Amy Carroll on the Voice America Business Channel. Welcome back to Partner Up with Amy Carroll. My guest today is Rajkumari Neogy, and we've been discussing how epigenetics, how it relates to what it is and how it works to, let me say that again, what is epigenetics and how it relates to workplace dynamics. And what I want to do now, Rajkumari, is shift our conversation into best practices for dismantling toxic work cultures.
Ooh.
Yeah, I know. And go.
Well, I think in order to answer that question, I run this series called Understanding Humans at Work. And it's a series for a reason because there's a lot of content. It's 2 hours per module. And we kind of ease into understanding humans at work. and and it's really about creating cultures of psychological safety in order to create cultures of belonging. That's what it's all about, right?
Create
It's choosing.
cultures of psychological safety to create cultures of belonging. Okay.
Yes, exactly. So the foundational experience is belonging, and psychological safety is really the act of engaging with individuals to create that foundational safety of belonging, whether it's trust or respect or whatever that is. And so to really understand how we do that, I always take them through these like bite-size um, uh, moments of neuroscience, taking Sarah Payton's information and kind of making into these little, these bite-sized moments. And I think it's important to understand that we have two hemispheres, and that we have a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere, and they really are, because they're designed so differently in our brains, they actually do completely different things.
Okay.
One isn't better than the other because we need both. However, I think globally we have given a lot more weight to the left hemisphere.
Sure.
Because the left hemisphere is where we do data. The left hemisphere is where we are measuring and comparing and evaluating. And it's where we are our functional selves. I like to
Mm-hmm.
say that it's the human doing aspects of who
Yeah.
we are.
Yeah.
But if we don't incorporate the human being aspects of who we are, that right hemisphere, then now we're showing up in that place of fear. Now we're showing up in that place of transactionality, right? We're
Mm.
just trying to get stuff done.
Yeah.
We're literally leaving bodies in the wake. I had a client that I coached at Airbnb, and one day, Brian Chesky, who's the CEO of Airbnb, came out and he's like, I have all these things and we need to get them done immediately and da 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 da. And the team was like, I don't know, that's a long list and that's a very short amount of time. I don't know if we can get it done. And my client, when I was coaching, was so focused and determined to get that done that
Mm-hmm.
he did. He got everything done that he needed to get done, and he was promptly fired. And the reason is because he left bodies in the wake. He did not
Oh, right.
bring in that relationality piece. He just got things done. And when we lose that aspect of
Right.
relationality, what ends up happening is we don't have a sense of trust. We don't have a sense of safety. That person probably was causing stress for other people
Right.
because it wasn't taking time to listen, right? So I wanted to just start with that because it's so important that we truly understand that we are becoming masterful in bringing both our hemispheres equally forward in every conversation.
Okay.
And to be honest, some people need some work on bringing forward their relationality
Oh, yeah.
hemisphere. And so, in looking at the work of Jaak Panksepp, he has a couple of TED Talks.
Say the
His
name
body,
again.
Jaak Panksepp,
Okay.
and his body of work is called Affective Neuroscience. So if you just search for that, Jaak's work will pop up.
Yeah, that's easier for me to spell.
and and so his work really focused on the circuitries of the brain. And what we quickly find is that the left hemisphere has our motivational circuit, our get stuff done circuit,
Right.
all the other circuits, all of the emotional circuits, the play circuit, the care circuit, the fear circuit, the rage circuit, all of those other, the panic grief circuit, they all are in the right hemisphere.
Wow.
So if we are not engaging our right hemisphere in every conversation, we are literally leaving dollars on the table because we cannot see and sense how someone is showing up, what they're experiencing, what their frustrations are, what their concerns are, what they're worried about. And we can't connect at that level to really surface the greatest fear in order to get the product, in order to ship the deadline, ship the product, get the deadline, right? All of those things that we do in
All the
business,
above.
all the above, right? And so that is why when we are able to understand what motivates us, how we get stuff done, but we couple it with this relationality piece, that allows us now to really create psychological safety.
Okay. So, what is something people can do immediately to access this care circuit?
Honestly, it is the most surprising thing, and it costs nothing,
Okay, that's good. I'm listening.
and it is taking a breath.
Really?
What happens in the moment?
I'm
Let me
just going
give
to do
you
that
an
right now, just in case.
Tess, I'll take a breath right now. Have you ever been in a meeting where it's like a 1 hour or 2 hour brainstorming meeting, and you're like, yeah, and then we can do this, and we could do that, and we can add this, and we can do that, and it's just going on, and but you're still in the flow, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden the meeting ends. You're like, I have to run to the bathroom, and you run to the bathroom, or you're like, notice you're starving all of a sudden.
Yeah.
That shift is a literal move from the left to the right because the right hemisphere holds our connection and relationship to our body.
Uh-huh.
So when you breathe,
Uh-huh.
that's the movement back to the right. And then
You're
that breath
accessing.
exactly gives you a pause, literally and figuratively, to then do that reflection and actually get curious, ask a question, notice what's happening in the room, right? Getting out of your head and into your body.
Yeah.
So breathing is absolutely essential, and it's everywhere in my content. And it is one of the most common things people say in the series. Wow, just even the breathing and being told to breathe all the time in these series is really helping me to reflect and reconnect to myself. And that's the whole point, right? We're teaching ourselves a new language of connection and relationality through breath. So that's thing.
Mm-hmm.
Thing two is, how are you engaging with others? Are you accessing empathy? Empathy is the quickest way to create connection authentic. If there is a lack of empathy, it's because the care circuit, your care circuit, isn't properly online. In fact, if you're focused the whole time on fixing the problem or fixing the person or giving them solutions or telling them what's wrong, all of that is not in relationship with that person. All of that is problem solving and transactionality. So,
Is this why that stereotype of the wife complains about her day and the husband goes to fixing solution mode and she gets frustrated because maybe what she's really wanting is connection? Did I oversimplify?
100%.
Oh,
It's never about the male or the female differences. It is simply about the hemispheres.
right.
And when we have not exercised the right hemisphere and made it okay to be empathic with others,
Mm-hmm.
right? And made it okay to slow down and just be in that pain. Here's a great example for those of you who've seen, and if you haven't, please do, the movie Inside Out. Have you seen that, Amy?
Yes.
So there's a moment when one of the characters loses something that's really important to him. It's, I think it's oh my gosh, I'm blanking, like a sleigh or a trolley or something. And and the character who's really hyper and joyful is trying to get the one who has the loss to laugh, and make jokes and really kind of like, come on, we'll solve this. It'll be fine. It'll be great. Just forget about it. Let's go. And the one who lost that trolley is really in a sense of mourning.
Mm-hmm.
But third character comes into play. And all that third character does is simply acknowledge that loss. And in that moment, that very simple acknowledgement instantaneously shifts that grief
Yep.
back into engagement. And then that character who lost the sled or whatever, the trolley, is like, great, let's go do what we need to go get done. And the character who was all about joy and distraction and fixing has a moment, an epiphany, and goes, oh, wait a second. When we acknowledge loss, then we get to move through it. Oh, wow, that's the value of sadness. And that whole scene is so powerful. And so if for your example, if the husband just listened to the
Yeah.
wife complaining and simply said, wow, that sounds really challenging, or that must have been really frustrating, or sounds like you had a tough moment there, it releases it.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, that's where what we're studying nonviolent communication and when I'm learning more about feelings and needs and how sometimes the issue doesn't have to change at all. I just acknowledging what I'm feeling, what I'm needing. It's, if someone else is not available to do it for me, although my friend, I call her Empathy Emma because she's so good at it. When she's not available and I do it myself, I just feel that peace.
Right?
And the issue or the problem has not changed or been resolved.
And so that is why transparency in organizations is critical, and especially acknowledging failures where things went wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to fix where things went wrong, but acknowledging where things went wrong is being accountable, it's being transparent, it's being vulnerable, and it is an immediate connection org wide for those who are feeling distrustful, disconnected, unsure, suspicious, whatever. And so doing that masterfully, I want to be very clear, doing that masterfully and with coaching is really essential in bringing that level of trust and psychological safety
Mm-hmm.
back online for the organization,
Mm-hmm.
the teams.
So when you're working with leaders and with teams, what kind of exercises or skills or practices are you having them do along
And
with the
that's why,
breathing?
yeah, definitely the breathing, and definitely having them go through the Understanding Humans at Work series, because what we do is we obviously share content, but then we have these very potent questions in these breakout rooms where they get to go and talk about what's actually not working. What could we do things differently? How do we bring this more currently up to date? What's still a point of frustration?
Mm.
What needs addressing? And these conversations, the number one thing I hear coming out of those conversations was, oh, I had no idea that so and so in the other department had the exact same issue.
Yeah.
And the moment that that happens, the amygdala actually starts to calm down. The amygdala is the part of our brain that holds a lot of the emotion. And as we calm down, we have a sense of community. We have a sense of support. We
Yeah.
know that now there's someone else who's going through that, and we feel less alone. And to your point, right, when we have a sense of loneliness, our whole stress level increases, our body's immune response is activated. So when we have these conversations
Yeah.
that allow us to express what our point of frustration is, what's
Yep.
missing,
Yep.
what's not currently working, and just share that. You don't
Yeah.
have to fix it or solve it,
Yep.
just share it. And then we come out and we tell the group, the larger group debrief, hey, I just was in my group and I shared that, we don't have cherry Coke in the kitchen. And that's an issue for me for whatever reason. Just to be able to share that.
Yeah.
Now there's now a broader transparency around across the organization.
Yeah.
There are other people having their voice heard. And that is so essential.
Yeah. So as you were describing this, it made me think of something that I just went through the last few days. About a month ago, I coached a small group of people from my theater troupe on what I do professionally on body language, voice, and words. And the first person that went, I coached really hard, and he didn't really know what to expect. And I think it really destabilized him. Except I didn't know this because he kept it to himself. And then we had a couple more rehearsals, and in a rehearsal I said, hey, by the way, and this was not related to the coaching I had done, it was just the whole group. If I give you anyone feedback that doesn't work for them, let me know. So he took that as an invitation to come and approach me and say, well, by the way, when you were doing a different type of coaching, that really bothered me, and I was really angry and I didn't understand it. And I forced myself to really listen and try not to justify or explain or defend, and give him empathy. So, wow, I can imagine. And yeah, you were the first one to go. And of course, you didn't have a role model. I could really see why that was destabilizing. Okay, we left that conversation. A week later, I saw him again. He came up to me and said, oh, Amy, that did me the world of good to express that to you.
Yep.
And I could feel the bond between us got stronger. So the psychological safety was reestablished and maybe even strengthened because I just made a generic invitation for people to let me know if something didn't work for them. And he had the courage to speak his truth. And then I had the ability to listen without getting defensive.
Beautiful. And
Yeah.
that's key. That's so key and so important. Nicely done. And
Thanks.
how do we create, those places? How do we create? One of my clients has something called Brave Spaces and Healing Hours, right? For their communities, their ERGs. Another client does listening tours. Another client
Say
actually
more about
creates.
that listening tours. What are those?
Yeah, so listening tours are where she goes around and actually every quarter and goes around and asks what's going on. She does a one-on-one with all of the senior leaders, org-wide. It's a smaller company, obviously, where she can really kind of take the temperature and the pulse of what's going on. And there's a private moment to share some grief or some strife, and she takes that to heart. And then, that just listening, they feel cared for. They feel that they look forward to these 1 hour calls once a quarter because They get to just share what's in their hearts and minds. And that's so essential. How do you create uh, a space for people to share what's in their hearts and minds from a place of self-reflection and what are the pain points that is really in their bodies that they are carrying in every meeting, and
Mm-hmm.
just to get that out.
Mm-hmm. I want to give you the time that we have remaining, just freedom to share whatever else you want as far as the impact maybe on of trauma, of grief, for
Mm.
uh, people of color, anything that is you're inspired to share. I really feel like I just want to keep listening.
It's so sweet. I think what's so essential is for those who are witnessing patterns of behavior in themselves and would love to shift that. The invitation is to kind of find the thread of the root of that experience to the best you can. And to allow, this is what's key about trauma. It's a really interesting concept. Um, if I experience something incredibly difficult, but I experience it alone, potentiality of that becoming trauma and eventually PTSD is present.
Okay.
If I experience something incredibly difficult, but I'm surrounded by community and I get to process that, that remains a difficult experience and doesn't actually move into trauma.
Hmm.
And so when we carry things alone in our bodies, that buildup can be quite detrimental to our physical and mental well being. And so I was just working actually with a client a few weeks ago who had a lot of imposter syndrome and wanted to make sure that she was, quote unquote, doing it right constantly. And one of the things I noticed in our sessions was that she kept bringing up um, this past work experience that was horrible. And she kept comparing it to where she is now, which is not at all, it's the antithesis of that. And so I kind of paused her in a session and I asked her if she'd be willing to do a visualization with me, which is one of the main components of my coaching framework. And she agreed. And what we did is we invited that version of her in the workplace that, in fact, was harassed and, excluded and treated less kindly by her boss. And we just had her visualize that version of her who was in that she wasn't there anymore. We had her look at the current version of her standing in this workplace with this new boss and this new experience. And she said it was a life changing experience.
Mm.
So, the reason why I share this is because when we've had difficult experiences that have led us to have the experience of trauma, there is such an element of loneliness in that trauma.
Yeah.
And to go back to the story about unacknowledged grief, when we acknowledge that experience, now that gets to move and shift, right? And that's why bringing these spaces and these forums to the company at large, where they get to express themselves, is so critical because that now gives an opportunity to acknowledge what was difficult, release that, be seen in that acknowledgement, and now how do we move forward together?
Mm-hmm.
That is so essential.
Yeah. Oh, Rajkumari, this has been a really rich and encouraging conversation for me to have with you.
Thank you.
And we're going to start to wrap up. So, my last question for you is, what is one call for action that you have for listeners?
Oh my gosh.
I know it's not fair.
I think I would invite people to maybe pick up two different books.
Okay.
For the functional aspect of selves, or that doing self, grab Patrick Lencioni's book called The Advantage. It's such a great book in ensuring that we are communicating with clarity to teams so
Okay.
that we be aligned. The second is to pick up Sarah Payton's book, Your
Yes.
Resonant Self, and to really do some self reflection and deep dive into your own particular journey and how to uncover all those patterns that may be hindering your progress.
Yeah. Give the title again, because I think I talked while you said it.
Oh, Your Resonant Self.
There we go. Good. And I would add to that my call for action, Wesley said earlier, listeners, go on to Rajkumari's website and sign up for her newsletter to get access to her Biology of Belonging bootcamp. And that is no cost. So I'm telling you, you got to do this. And I'll look forward to seeing you there. Her website again is RajKuMariNeogy. And also, Rajkumari, in just 10 seconds, can you tell us how can people find your articles on Fast Company? Because those are some really rich articles.
Yeah, just Google my name in Fast Company. And
Oh
there's
my God, so easy.
three different articles that will pop up.
Yeah, they're great articles. Okay, I got 30 seconds. So I reach out to me, listeners, if you want to share your challenges and clashes, and I will talk about them on future shows. You can reach me at amy@carrollcoaching.com. And you can also, if you want to, be sure to switch on, tune in, listen up, and be inspired next week. I'm going to be interviewing Terry Real. He's a nationally recognized family therapist, author, and teacher. Terry is particularly known for his groundbreaking work on men and male psychology, as well as his work on gender and couples. Feel free to reach out to me on social media. You can do that on Amy Carroll Coaching, 2 R's, 2 L's. And if you're game for more, I'm going to be hopping over to Facebook Live 5 minutes past the hour for a short chat on today's call. Thank you, Rajkumari. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Amy.
And thank you, listeners. You have been listening to Partner Up with Amy Carroll on the Voice America Business Channel. Happy partnering, everyone.